Okay, we're gonna start now, and then we're gonna get people joining in the next few minutes. Thank you again, everyone, for joining in. My name is Edil Sepulveda. I am the applications coordinator for NASA CMS Carbon Monitoring System Initiative. Today is the continuation of the policy speaker series that we have, and we are very happy to have Erica Smith. She's a community forestry manager at the Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, and she's going to be talking about the Philly tree plan towards an equitable urban forest. And we're going to talk about trees, monitoring trees, but also we're going to talk about LiDAR. So we're very excited because besides engaging with federal state agencies, we have an interest to engaging with local agencies and organizations as well. Before going to the presentation, I just wanted, for those of you, I see a few people that are new to CMS, those of you that don't know about the CMS initiative, we have archived already more than 100 data products. Those ones that are related to biomass, that are the interest of this talk, can be found at the Oak Ridge National Lab DAC. You can see them here, and a few examples. We have this LiDAR derived above ground biomass canopy height, canopy cover for Maryland. It is being used extensively by different state, local agencies in the state of Maryland, including for monitoring urban tree canopy goals. We also have a LiDAR derived tree canopy cover for states in the Northeast, and that's a 1 meter tree canopy cover for different states in the Northeast, including Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland. And there you can see an example of the estimated tree canopy cover in the region of Pittsburgh. So if you want to know more about these products, the projects, you can go to the website carbon.nasa.gov. Besides having information about the initiative, the projects, you can also find how stakeholders are working with the different projects and how they're using this data to inform decision making. As always, I remind everyone we have in the website, you can find the synthesis phase 2 report, where you can learn more about the scope, findings, gaps, and recommended next steps of NASA carbon monitoring system. Some important days, we have a stakeholder workshop in Pasadena, California, coming up September 26th. The science team meeting of the program is going to be September 27, 28 in Pasadena. And then we always have a couple of sessions at the AU fall meeting that this year is going to happen the week of December 11, 15 in San Francisco, California. We have an open call for papers, a special call on carbon monitoring system on the Environmental Research Letters Journal. So you have any paper that you want to submit, please consider this call. Recently, there is a lot of involvement from CMS in this Applied Earth Observations Innovation Partnership between NASA and U.S. Forest Service. We held a workshop just a few weeks ago in Salt Lake City, Utah. A lot of information was very relevant for people that work on biomass forest monitoring. So if you want to find out more information about this initiative, the results, see the recordings, the slides of the recent workshop, you can visit aoip.com. And with that, we're gonna now go to the presentation, today's presentation on the Philly tree plan, and we have Erica Smith here. Erica, I'm gonna stop sharing so you can share your screen, and then it's on your side now, Erica.
Okay, thank you very much. So, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be able to present to this group. I want to first say that I am dealing with a little bit of a sore throat and a cough, so I may have to take breaks to drink my ginger tea. But I also have a bunch of my colleagues here because a lot of them are more involved in the data related implementation of the Philly Tree Plan than I am. And so I wanted them to be able to speak to that. So I know I've got Max Blaustein, who is with our natural lands team here at the Parks Department, Abby Sullivan with our Office of Sustainability, and then a bunch of our Forest Service colleagues who we work with very closely on our work. I think Max Piana is here, and Rich Hallett, Krista Heinlein, maybe Jason Henning as well. Maybe you guys can introduce yourselves in the chat if you'd like. Tim Eiffel is here from our major nonprofit partner here in the city, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. And I think that's my group joining me today. So they'll be available to answer some of the questions at the end here. So today I'm going to talk about the Philly Tree Plan, the data analysis that went into launching the plan that we based our community outreach on, and then some of the early implementation projects that we're doing that are also data-based. Most of what I'm going to talk about is how we engaged the residents of the city in creating the tree plan, and how we used data to make sure that we were reaching the residents that were most vulnerable to the lack of trees and would benefit the most from increases in tree planting and care in their neighborhoods. So we released our Philly Tree Plan in February of this year. It is a 10-year strategic plan, and we were motivated throughout and guided throughout the process by environmental justice, community engagement, and sustainability. And these three values guided the process of the plan creation. We tackled the entirety of the urban forest, so alleyway trees, residential yard trees, street trees, vacant lot trees, park trees, all of them. And one of the reasons why we and many cities are engaging on this strategic approach is that in the city of Philadelphia, we have an urban forest that is not equitably distributed across the city. You can see from this map and many of the other maps I'll show you that it really is concentrated in certain areas, and those areas coincide with lots of different demographics that you might expect. We'll go into detail on that. Also, here in Philadelphia, like many cities, we have a really bad heat island, and there is up to 22 degrees difference in some of the coolest and the hottest neighborhoods in the city. So this is another thing that really motivated our approach. So before we began the creation of the tree plan itself, we did a tree canopy assessment. We worked with Jarlath O'Neill Dunn at the University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab, and he also works with the Forest Service. We've worked with this lab on our original tree canopy assessment we did in 2011, this current tree canopy assessment, and we are planning on working with him on one of the implementation pieces that we'll be talking about as well. So what we looked at in the tree canopy assessment is how much tree canopy do we have, and in an exciting, we were very excited to be able to look at how has it changed over time, because we do have the previous LIDAR data to compare to, and how does the tree canopy relate to other factors. So we used LIDAR data from 2008 and 2018. We got this from the city of Philadelphia, which flies LIDAR regularly. And we were able to create maps like this. Obviously, it wasn't a snap of the fingers, but this is the incredible amount of detail we were able to get. Now, this does not include quality of this tree canopy, but it does include where it was lost and where it grew over time. So we got maps. I'm going to just go through a couple of these amazing maps. This is a more residential area. You can see a lot of tree canopy that was lost behind people's houses in the street area. This is one of our largest parks, FDR Park. You can see that some of the more natural areas we had tree canopy grow from existing canopy. But then in some of our neighborhood parks like this is Marconi Plaza. in Kensington, which is one of the hardest hit for the opioid crisis here in Philadelphia, you had a lot of tree canopy loss, right? And these are individual trees that are coming down and not being replaced. And then this is a snapshot of the street tree canopy where we've lost trees. Now, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, Tim and his team, that organization, along with the city, have been planting street trees for decades. But a lot of those trees, they take a while to grow, and so we weren't really seeing them showing up yet. So what we found is that we had 20% tree canopy across the city, obviously not fairly distributed, and that we had lost 6% of the existing tree canopy. And most of the loss occurred on residential land. So the other factors that interacted, right? The tree canopy has an inverse relationship with poverty. We are the sixth largest city in the country at 1.6 million, and we are the poorest of the large cities. We have over 25% poverty rate in our city, and you can see there's that inverse relationship there. There's also fewer trees in black and brown neighborhoods. We have, lots of cities like to say that they're the city of neighborhoods. Philadelphia likes to say that too, and we have a lot of very unique neighborhoods where demographics haven't changed in decades and decades, and so you can see these patterns. So from the tree canopy assessment, we got a few key findings that really led us through the strategic plan creation. So we knew, everyone knows you need to preserve existing tree canopy, but we put a fine point on it by observing that, when you see these tree canopy loss, that is an event that can be stopped. But tree canopy gain is a process. Those large trees growing bigger over time was a really big contributor to the gain that we saw. And the city's residents are crucial because a lot of that tree canopy is on residential land. A lot of the potential for new tree canopy is on residential land, and a lot of the loss we saw was on residential land. So we took this tree canopy assessment and we brought together 100 stakeholders from across the city, the region, and some of our most engaged community groups to talk about the data and to talk about what we wanted to do with it. And you can see we had a lot of folks at our Philly Tree Summit, we called it, and we really talked about what we wanted to see in a plan with informed stakeholders. So we launched the creation of the plan in October of 2020. As you can imagine, it was a very difficult time to be getting meaningful input from people on a strategic effort. But we had, excuse me, I'm gonna cough. Where is my mute button? Nope, I can't find it. Sorry, guys. We had a number of engaged committees and lots of different layers of involvement. So a project team that was really advising closely on the creation of the plan, a steering committee that was advising at key intervals, a community voices steering committee. This was those crucial community leaders who were very involved, who could represent the concerns of their community. And then our consultant team that we hired had 6 organizations and their own advisory team. So it was quite a large group of people, and it didn't end there. This is the consultant team. You can see the different focuses that we said we wanted reflected in this as well. Apologies. If someone can help me figure out where my mute button is so no one has to hear me cough every 3 seconds. Oh, wait. That's it. My apologies, everyone. So you can see that the engagement aspect of the project team really reflected that big push that we wanted to make to get folks engaged in creating this plan. So our Community Voices Steering Committee, one of the first things that we did with them was to map the priority areas of the city that we wanted to get the most feedback from, because again, these are the folks who are most vulnerable, the folks who can benefit the most. We used a number of variables. Poverty, health, heat was one of our biggest variables. We used that as twice the weight of other variables. We used public health data like asthma, mental health, and cancer rates to get this priority area map that you'll see over and over again on the right here. So we had 6 different engagement tools that we used to get people's input. I'm going to go into depth on these first 3, but we also had stakeholder workshops where we engaged people who were in different subject areas, subject area experts, a virtual open house because again it was 2020, and an Instagram photo challenge, again trying to get people engaged in many different levels. But when we were doing all of this, we were really trying to lead with being as accessible as possible. My apologies. I'm going to skip through maybe 1 or 2 of these. We did a community meetings tour. This is one of the places where we use that data. We wanted to make sure, again, we're hearing from people in these high priority areas. And we attended 32 community meetings and spoke to 850 people across the city. We also did a neighborhood ambassador program. This was a paid program where we had 22 different people from 5 of those priority areas. We did workshops with them to teach them how to do peer-to-peer interviews. We did walking workshops around the neighborhood so that they could point out the different ways that people were engaging with trees in their neighborhood. And we did a visual storytelling workshop so that they could document that as well. So here are a couple of the photos that they sent us, ways that people are enjoying the tree canopy and ways that trees are bad ambassadors in their neighborhoods. We did a citywide survey online, and again, we were trying to make it accessible by using plain language questions, encouraging storytelling. We had a lot of open-ended questions, and distributing it to a lot of networks that were not the typical networks. So immigrant rights, renters' rights, other networks like that, to make sure we were trying to get people across the spectrum. We also factored in time to pause and evaluate where we were receiving the survey responses from, and we took some time to adjust the outreach methods. We distributed yard signs in parks in these high priority areas. We paid residents to do 3,000 phone calls to people in these areas to do the survey with them over the phone. We sent text messages and we distributed door hangers. And you can see the messaging of this survey was trying to really make people understand that we are not just looking for tree lovers. We wanted everyone to take the survey. And we had a little incentive there with a gift card too. So in summary, we had over 7,000 people respond to our survey in 8 different languages. We translated the survey into 8 different languages, and we received responses in all 8 of those languages. 60% of them came from zip codes with high or medium priority based on our analysis of where we wanted the feedback to come from. We had 22 of those ambassadors in 5 neighborhoods and almost 850 residents, and all of this data was incorporated into the final analysis. And the key takeaways, man, I apologize, everyone. The key takeaways were many different things that we kind of already knew, but we were very interested to see that residents had observed as well. That there's a disparity in tree canopy. We know this, we've seen it on the map, but people know why there is a disparity and it feels personal to them. We didn't actually expect that so many people would already really understand the value of trees, but not be willing to participate in programs because of the burdens they perceive those trees to bring and how those have known costs, but also surprise costs. Some people just didn't know how to get to our programs and services. And a lot of this led to how important maintenance of our existing tree canopy is, not only to protect those trees so they can get bigger, but also to build back trust with residents. So a quick summary of the goals of our plan, and I put a link in the last slide so you can go to it and read it in more depth. But coordinating support for trees, coordination between city agencies, between all of the stakeholders and the residents is very crucial. Protecting our existing forest and our future urban forest. Growing the urban forest, but making sure to do it equitably and in a community-led way. Acknowledging the burden of trees on residents and reducing that burden wherever possible. Investing in people and communities, and a lot of this is focused on trying to get people jobs in this field in their own neighborhoods. Improving our communication, advocacy, and celebrating the ways that communities are already engaging with trees and lifting that up. So you'll see our priority area map again here. We divided it into 7 different neighborhoods. And each of these neighborhoods, we analyzed the planting, the number of trees required to get to our planting goals and how much that would cost in different land uses. We have a community-led method for growing tree canopy at the neighborhood level through coordination between the city and our nonprofit partners like PHS. And we laid out the guiding principles for how we engage the community in growing the tree canopy so that it is done in a way that maintains, that grows the trust and maintains that trust over time. So mercifully, I'm going to hand it off to Max so he can talk about one of our first data-based implementation phases. Go ahead, Max.
Thank you, Erica. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, everyone. So I'm Max Blaustein. I'm an environmental scientist on the Philly Parks and Rec Natural Lands team, as Erica mentioned, and was pleased to be a project team member for the Philly Tree Plan and now leading one of these early implementation projects. So as you can see in this map that Erica showed again, the density of tree canopy across the city is very uneven, and where you see those darkest areas are largely within the city's natural lands. So the city owns approximately 10,000 plus acres of parkland. The natural lands comprise a little more than 6,000 of those. And you can see they largely border our riparian corridors within the city. So this is an impact of early city planners understanding the value of protecting public drinking water sources from development and industrialization. And so we're fortunate to have extensive parkland abutting our waterways. And much of these lands within the park are heavily forested, have been for some time. Though it wasn't until the late 90s in 1998 when a specific team within the department was formed specifically to manage these lands. And so at that time, they conducted an extensive inventory of city-owned parkland to understand what the resource was and to lay out a pretty comprehensive document outlining what are the priorities and opportunities for restoration of these forested natural areas, primarily within the city. So given that it's been 25 years since that time, conditions have changed significantly. The available tools and technologies to do this sort of assessment work have increased exponentially. And we've done 25 years worth of work trying to manage and maintain these spaces. So it's an opportune moment for us to sort of reassess the condition of the resource, look at what our management tactics are, assess how successful they've been or not been, and what other strategies we can take going forward, understanding that conditions are likely to change even more. Switch to the next, please. So as Erica mentioned, the City of Philadelphia contracts on a regular basis capture of high resolution orthoimagery and LiDAR. Right now, they're on a 3-year schedule, which is an amazing resource that's available for use by a number of city departments. All that is also available on the city's open data portal, so anyone can go there and download all this information and use those base maps. So we're in the early phases of this project. We are putting together a contract with the Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab, as Erica mentioned, who did the previous citywide tree canopy assessments, and they're going to be helping us with this more specific subset. So we're going to be using the orthoimagery and LiDAR that the city has available. And then we're also going to be combining a pretty extensive field data collection effort starting in 2024. So distributing fixed plots around these areas so that we can really try to gain an understanding of the distribution, composition, and condition of natural areas within the park system to help us inform management and research priorities. We've also been talking with some folks about doing additional under canopy LiDAR capture to sort of supplement those structural metrics. And so I imagine that's something some of our other Forest Service colleagues might be able to speak a little bit more to. But we're fortunate to have robust data to start with, but we'll be doing pretty extensive field measurement at the stem level, measuring individual trees across a pretty large area. So it's going to be a significant effort, but we're looking forward to it. And the next one. So once we complete the process, the team at the Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab will merge those data sets, the remotely sensed information, the field capture, and try to build models to project out across. Really, we're going to focus on the city-owned land because that's where our management will happen, but they are able to do this at the city scale. So we're going to understand where natural areas are across the city and how those public lands interface with private lands, because those have implications for management as well. But really, we're going to focus down on the lands that we're in control of as a department and help us shape planning and management over the coming decades. And so like some of the tools that we're looking forward to being able to use are some of the climate vulnerability assessment protocols that groups like NIACS have put together. So we'll have comprehensive data that we can use to really understand from a scale, from a stand to a system-wide scale, what our relative vulnerability is, understand what the relative health and threat of different parcels within the park system are, so that we can really understand where should we be focusing our admittedly somewhat limited resources. We're a very small team. It's a city department, so funding is always tight, and we're not able to really comprehensively manage the extent of the land that we're responsible for. And so we have to be very judicious in how we direct those resources. And so really making an effort to try and understand where can we have the biggest impact for the residents that we are doing this work on behalf of, and that are going to have like long-lasting effects on the landscape. So using pre-existing tools, and then also developing new tools that will have utility not only for us, but also the goal is to sort of develop protocols that can then be useful, similar to the general urban tree canopy assessments that Jarlath and others now do for cities across the country. Hopefully we can develop a system that is useful for other managers of urban natural areas. And then one of the other just sort of subsets of this work that's very granular is tree canopy gap identification. So this is something that Erica mentioned is a useful metric on a citywide scale, but this is something at the very small level that we're going to be using to direct management activities. Our canopy is largely mature, native dominated, but there's not healthy regeneration under there. And so having 3-year LiDAR, we're going to be able to identify these changes in canopy in a very short time scale and respond quickly, and hopefully be able to implement management strategies that sort of change the trajectory of how those canopy gaps typically fill in, which is not with a healthy next generation in the absence of management. So that's one of our prime areas of research and management focus going forward. And I know there are some other colleagues on the call here, so if folks have questions about any of the specifics, we'll try to address them.
Right, thank you, Max. I also wanted to mention that Abby Sullivan, who's here from our Office of Sustainability, that office has worked with NASA on a number of projects, mostly relating to heat, I believe. But Abby, if you wanted to say a few things about other ways that we've worked with data, you do that now, or I don't know if you wanted to go to questions instead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, the audio didn't work for me, so I called in. So I'm not sure if it's going through my computer or through my phone. Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I mean, as Erica mentioned, we did work with the NASA Develop team in the past to work on updating our heat vulnerability index. And then we also work with the NASA NSELECT team on sea level rise. And those are just really two of the other areas, but that's not with your program. But we love remote sensing data. I mean, it's so cool. So.
Well, thank you so much, Abby. Thank you, Erica, for giving that presentation. It was a lot of good information for us, knowing how the city is using remote sensing data for different applications that are very important for society there. And thank you for taking the time, even though you have, the sore throat. So thank you for that, and thank you, Max, also for the time. So now we have time for some questions, comments to the speakers. You can either type your question in the chat box, or I'll give some time for people. You can raise your hand and ask the question directly to some of the speakers that we had here. Erica, Max, I think we have other people from U.S. Forest Service that are working with the city of Philadelphia. Abby that mentioned that they have worked on other projects that are not related to tree, but more related to urban heat island, and I understood that it was sea level rise also, the other one. So I'll start while we get questions from the audience. We have also engaged, I mentioned, with a couple more at the state level in the Northeast to let them know about LiDAR data that we have. We have had a couple of funded projects with George Hurt at the University of Maryland, and also with Jarlath O'Neill. So we're very happy to hear that that you're all working with Jarlath. Obviously, especially at the local level, I mean that there are a lot of challenges, especially if you want to use and integrate remote sensing data, LiDAR data, even satellite data for efforts like this. So I don't know if you want to share any lessons learned on the challenges that the city has had using or incorporating remote sensing data in this process, these efforts for monitoring urban canopy. And also, if you are coordinating with other cities regarding, the lessons learned of other cities monitoring urban tree canopy. We have worked in the past with the Baltimore City Department of Park and Recreation of Baltimore, and they have been using some of the NASA data to monitor their urban tree canopy goals. So.
Well, I think that one of the challenges from the perspective of our entire urban forest is that, trees grow slowly. And so people always want to know like what the impact of certain programs or interventions are, and we just can't answer those questions on the time frame that they want us to answer them. Um, so that's just kind of inherent to the work. I think also, we at the city are, I'm gonna have to pause again and maybe let Max answer the question. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah. I'll say, I mean, we clearly are resource limited, but are fortunate that there are contractors and researchers, people like Jarlath, who are interested and willing to work with us, and having a partner team with folks like Davey Tree, who are on here, and the U.S. Forest Service, and our nonprofit partners. I mean, so even though we're sort of lacking from a departmental standpoint some of the resources and skills to manage some of this remote sensing information, I think there's, at least from my experience, I've been heartened with the availability of experts who are willing to participate in this process with us. And so it hasn't really, I mean, I've been focused on this one subset, so I won't speak for anything beyond that. But the ability to do what we need to do, to understand what's reasonable and achievable, and what's new ground that we're going to have to engage in novel research or reach out to other people. We're definitely engaged with other cities. The Forest Service folks on this call have made a lot of effort in building a network of city managers, people responsible for these resources. And so making sure that there is connectivity between cities and other jurisdictions to make sure we can get the information we need.
Max, do you want to talk a little bit about the Forests and Cities Network and like how that collaboration happens?
Yeah, I don't know, Max Piana, are you on here? You may be better suited. Well, forests and cities.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So a little bit about forests and cities and our networks, I guess. So yeah, I'm Max Piana. I'm with the Forest Service, and we work. We have kind of developed two networks that are a national scale. The Forest and Cities Network is funded in part by the Forest Service, but led by the Natural Areas Conservancy up in New York City. It started off as 12 cities, and I believe it's up to 20 cities nationwide right now. And really forest management leaders in those cities. So oftentimes the municipality parks departments, but it's also up to policy level and nonprofit managers in those sites. And so that's a group that's really covering all issues related to natural lands, specifically forest and natural lands management, but also environmental justice topics, forest assessment, and then operational activities on the ground, how we sustain, conserve those. We also have another group that's kind of related and a lot of overlap, but it's more Northeast focused. It's called the Urban Silviculture Network, and that is a group that includes the Philly Natural Lands team, also partners in Baltimore, New York City, Westchester County, up to New Haven, Hartford, Connecticut, and Springfield, Mass. And so that's a group that's really focused more on the operational activities, strategies, and toolbox for sustaining these forests. So we're working with Max and the Philly team to think about how we do, can modify traditional forest inventory assessments. This is where the canopy gap analysis comes in, and how that translates to boots on the ground action.
That is amazing, Max. Thank you for that information. And I didn't know that we were going to have Erica. You had invited several people from the U.S. Forest Service, so it was very relevant what I mentioned at the beginning about this Applied Earth Observations Innovation Partnership that we have. It has been a partnership ongoing for 4 years between NASA and U.S. Forest Service, and it has been with mainly U.S. Forest Service program managers. and we just held this workshop like a month ago in Utah. And in the workshop, we had like 3-day workshop. We had a lot of trainings with different people from capacity building programs in NASA and also from the different DACs, the data archive centers where we archive some of the products. So this could be something very relevant. I'll definitely follow up with Max, with some other people. But I imagine also capacity building, especially from the side of NASA, and especially if you're thinking about using remote sensing satellite products for making decisions, I think is something that we can give and we can offer for decision makers and other people like the ones that are here at the city level. I think we have a question from, let me see, Keith Strong, about how have you involved homeowners associations, and then in general, I understand Keith maybe working with at the city level, because he mentioned that they're starting down this road, and if you can talk about what has worked best and what has not, kind of lessons learned from this effort to share with other city managers that might be here.
Yeah, so I don't know how much talking I can do right now, but I will respond a little bit in the chat. I'm also wondering if maybe Tim Eiffel, who is a really big part of our project team, would be willing to kind of speak to that as well. And then I'll type some answers.
Sure, I can jump in. Sorry about the voice and the sickness, Erica. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm Tim. I'm the director of the trees programs at Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, and was my whole team at our organization was very involved in the tree plans. So I would say, well, first off, Philly does not really have a lot of homeowners associations. I guess there are plenty of condo associations in the city, but there might be a handful of like actual like homeowners associations in single family neighborhoods, maybe in the Northeast, a few here and there, but really not a lot, not anything that I can think of, but plenty of condo associations. And I don't know if any of them were specifically engaged. Maybe Erica can comment on that in the chat. What worked best and what didn't work? I mean, I would say, as we kind of like wrapped up this process, we immediately transitioned into, with the timing of it, applying for funds with the Inflation Reduction Act for urban and community forests. So it was like really great timing for us to, start thinking about implementation of the plan, and then really like reflecting on the plan itself as we put that proposal together. And I think we were all just, it was a big lift to put the proposal together, but we were all a little bit giddy at how perfect it was that we had this plan ready to go, and how great our community engagement process was, just because we had, I think done a really good job, and I'll really put all the credit on Erica here and her team for pulling this together, of just engaging as many stakeholders as possible in the city, and connecting them and bringing them together frequently, so that they were sharing ideas and sharing feedback, and everyone being on the same page about what needs to be done, as we went from, creating a plan, which, in a worst case scenario would just live on a shelf gathering dust somewhere. I think that's often the fear when you're working on big projects, big planning projects like this. But yeah, as we immediately shift to implementation, it was huge to just have so many people on the same page, and the community feedback was great too. I mean, we were working with one of our colleagues at the Forest Service, and a grad student on some like research to add to the research about barriers to tree planting in urban neighborhoods. Kind of at the same time, the tree plan outreach and surveys were happening. And it was really neat to see how like the parallels of the community engagement that was happening, and the responses that Erica and the consultants were getting from the consultants and the ambassadors, and how neatly they were aligning with our experiences in the field, but also like the academic research that we were conducting at the same time. So yeah, I would say one thing that really worked well was that ambassadors, the heavy surveying efforts that took a lot of time and a lot of energy, because it wasn't just distributing a survey monkey. Erica kind of talked about how the surveys were designed to be especially engaging, and I think that was really important. So that when the plan finally did come together, we were all really confident that it included all of this great feedback and information from the city. And then I think another thing that worked really well was the way Erica and the consultants approached the calculations. She talked a little bit about that, but it wasn't just a matter of, okay, like here's how many like trees we need to plant to reach our goals. Like, so now we're going to turn it into like a plant, 250,000 trees initiative. It was really like thinking carefully about, what the expenses were in, not just planting, but care, what capacity needed to be built in order to do all this, like where the potential trees could go based on different priority areas and management units and land use and everything. So those were, I think, really helpful, and I think much better than I've seen other plans that had kind of like really basic calculations that are good, and they're a good starting point. But I think the way that these calculations were approached makes the plan much more valuable. And again, especially that we may now have the opportunity to do some heavy implementation of it if we're successful with our IRA funding. What didn't work? I think doing it during a pandemic was maybe not ideal. So hopefully other cities can avoid that situation. Hopefully we all can avoid that situation. Although again, I think just like, jumping into like Zoom meetings and surveys and electronic outreach, like did have maybe certain benefits in reaching folks. Although, not ones that we would want to repeat. The plan did take a long time to do, which, in a lot of cases was really good, and probably a reflection of how many stakeholders inside and outside of the city were involved. So I think there were times where like, some of the community members were like, oh, I keep hearing about this Philly tree plan, but I guess it's never coming out. Which, is a negative, but I think on the positive side of that, it really reflected the care that got put into the plan and the level of engagement for the stakeholders. So, I don't know, Erica, maybe you can add in the chat anything else that you might have thought didn't work well, but I'm kind of scratching my head about that because I'm really, really pleased with how it turned out. I mean, it's not, perfect for everybody. And like, of course, we took as much feedback as we can, but I think it's the best, I think it's a really impressive, like, summation of all of these different inputs from different stakeholders. So.
Thank you, Tim. I don't know if we have another question, but first, I don't know if Keith wanted to follow up regarding the answer, or if there is any question from anyone that wants to ask directly. You can unmute and ask the question directly to the speakers.
And people I can bug to ask more questions.
Okay, sorry for that. I didn't hear very well. Who was that?
He said he's good and he's going to reach out to me
Okay.
with more questions separately.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Somehow I didn't hear very well. Okay, so there are a couple of questions from Mark. I don't know if Max, you might be answering this, but how are you dealing with sighting on streets with power lines on poles? And are there any remote sensing, mapping, or utility data citizens involvement solutions? And what fraction of total planting do you envisage as yard trees versus street trees versus public parks? I don't know if you want to give it a shot, Max.
I think maybe I can try.
Okay.
So siting trees on streets is very difficult with all of the competing needs in our right of way. We are trying to work with our streets department on on how to site trees with public safety in mind. We don't really use remote sensing data or specific mapping about utilities. But we at the Parks Department just we're about 2 years into using a CityWorks based asset management system to manage our inventory of street and park trees. And the other city departments like water and streets also use CityWorks, so there is the potential in the future, and we have the goal in the tree plan to be able to make those communicate with one another, so that we can not rely on the regular coordinating meetings to avoid conflicts, but we can rely on the actual spatial data to avoid conflicts in the future. I don't know if that fully answers the question. And then fraction of total planting for yard trees, street trees, and public parks. In total, we did an analysis of the entire city and what would be required to reach a 30% tree canopy coverage, and we really used that number because it's a number that has been used for over a decade here in the city, and some of our other Forest Service researchers have researched the impact of what that tree canopy would do in terms of saving human lives and human health. And so we kind of stuck with that as a benchmark against which to gauge our funding and planting levels. And ultimately, each priority area has a breakdown of the street trees, yard trees, public trees, etc., that would be required to get to that benchmark, and the costs associated with that as well. In terms of the estimation of what is needed to reach, really, street trees and residential yard trees are very high in terms of the proportion of what we're going to need to plant in order to reach those goals. But one of the reasons why we're really focusing on our natural lands work is that, as Max said, we have over 6,000 acres of natural lands. It's more than half of our city park system. And just because it's green doesn't mean it's healthy. And we are, part of the whole assessment that we're doing is to try to understand the quality of that so that we can better protect it into the future and we don't lose that. It's very difficult with a big planning process like this to avoid like the bottom line numbers, but we're trying very hard to avoid being like, this is our number of stems we need to plant, because that doesn't tell the story. We're trying to tell a more complicated and nuanced story, and our natural areas and protecting them has a huge part to play in that story. So that's kind of an all over the place answer, but I guess it's really to say that we're really trying to use the data in this process to inform an equitable approach and a smart approach, but not to tell us where to plant things, because that has led to that breakdown of trust between people in the past, and the trust between the institutions that manage the urban forest and the residents needs to be built back. And we can do that and plant trees and protect them and care for them in an equitable way. And that's what the plan is about.
Thank you so much, Erica. We might have time for one more question. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in either in the chat or you can unmute and make the question. If not, before we go, I wanted to know, because I think, Max, you mentioned 1998, that there was a big assessment. You mentioned like 25 years. Then I saw like LiDAR that Erica showed from 2008, then to 2018. I was wondering how often do you need updates on the LiDAR or other remote sensing data that you might use in the future? How usually for like making either updates to the plan or for any decision making that you have to make, how often do you need those updates of the LiDAR remote sensing data?
Yeah, as we're developing the process, that'll kind of inform what the repetition looks like. But as I mentioned, the city acquires that on a 3-year cycle right now. It's unlikely we will go through this full process of assessment on that 3-year cycle. So we're trying to determine what subset of the measurements are going to be useful on the shorter time scale, and what is the longer time scale where we do this. It's hopefully going to be less than every 25 years. But something between 3 and 25 for the full scale assessment. And so the gap analysis and detection that we've talked about, 3 years at this point feels like a somewhat reasonable timescale. Obviously, as we get into that process, we'll see. But being able to understand across the system where those canopy change events happen on a short timescale is going to be incredibly valuable for us, because we're very reactionary, in our work. And so having the ability to do so on a shorter time scale before things degrade, those canopy gaps are often the source of invasive species and other problems for a surrounding stand. And so being able to address things at that core moment fairly quickly can help us protect the surrounding stand and avoid more intensive degradation over a longer time scale between when we would traditionally, be able to get someone out there to observe every acre of natural lands. I would certainly be interested to hear you folks maybe talk a little bit about what the tools available that you think might be applicable to some of the projects that we've been talking about, and see where there are opportunities for collaboration.
Definitely, Max. We do have a multi-state working group within one of the funded projects. I think I mentioned, and I chose some of the products at the beginning. It is a project that is being led by the PI George Hurt out of the University of Maryland, and we show some of the 30-meter above ground biomass maps and 1-meter tree canopy cover maps. I think also there has been a product developed that is carbon sequestration potential for the state of Maryland, and that can be done also and I think it was the plan for other states in the Northeast. And George is working closely with Jarlath in Vermont, in the Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab. So this is an ongoing project, and I think, as a next step, I will definitely reach out to you all to invite you to some of we have a quarterly meeting between state agencies, U.S. Forest Service people, NASA people for that. So that's something that we can definitely follow up on that. But I want to thank again Erica for taking the time, explaining the Philly tree plan, Max, Abby, team, everyone else that joined in. Thank you for the time. We'll be posting the slides and the recording of the talk in the website carbon.nasa.gov. And then please follow up with any questions that you have. And we'll be following up with you guys, Erica, Max, for some of the things that we discuss here. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.